Ham, perfect timing. James Ham, 1320 Kings Insider, joining us here for Media Day. Hammer, we appreciate you. We just played your clip of Harrison Barnes. What was your takeaway from that conversation with Harrison?
Um, it's interesting. He's been in the league a long time. He's seen a lot of highs and lows, and he's hoping for a high, but he's been here long enough to know that you're up against it, and it's not an easy thing to change a culture of losing. And they've been stuck in it for 16 years. I thought it was honest. I thought it was really honest. It's an amazing stat that Monty McNair was hired in September of 2020, and there's only 3 players left on the roster from that date, and 2 of them were shopped. There's still conversations that have happened over the last 3 months or so with some of these guys. So I mean, when you walk into a year and everything's supposed to be fresh and new, but you have some long, I don't know if it's history, but some things that stand out about the failures of what's happened here in the past years. I think it is hard. It's hard to move on and move forward. And I think walking out of a season like last year, it's hard to move off of that season, and it's hard to think that something better can happen just overnight. And I get that. So he's always going to be a pro. He's always going to speak his mind. I thought it was a really honest assessment by him, and I didn't take anything bad from it at all.
When it comes to Harrison, because I was actually trying to, Damian mentioned seeing him and seeing a certain disposition from Harrison. And I don't know, maybe it's just me. It was different just listening to him, because it sounded like he was like, well, like maybe there was a little bit of a change of heart there. Just hearing his words, seeing him, and seeing his disposition, it might have been a little different. But hearing him talk about how there's only 3 guys that are still here, and seeing the major change that had gone on. Maybe we talked about this earlier, James. Maybe it was a situation where at the end of the season, he'd be like, no, I'm kind of done with Sacramento. Whether they want to trade me or this is the last year, fine, whatever, I'm done. And maybe Sacramento felt the same way. But as the season and the offseason went along, it seemed like maybe they started looking at each other like, well, I mean, we can get back together here if you want to, but things are going to have to be different. It kind of feels like that's where Harrison is. Or, in your opinion, James, is he still kind of like, I'm not believing nothing until I see something different around here?
I think that that's kind of where it's at. I mean, he's always going to be a pro. He's always going to do his work in the offseason. He's always going to come in ready for camp and ready to start over. Again, he knows Mike Brown. He's worked with Mike Brown. It's just one of those things that, like, over the course of years, and again, in the chatty house, we have Aldrin J saying that I wanted Harrison Barnes traded all offseason. That's just not the case. What it is you have to be realistic, and he's realistic, and I'm realistic about who and where he is in his career and where he would like to be. What he would like to be is, someone asked him about, getting back to the playoffs, and it's like, how important is it to snap the streak? And he said, how important it is just to make the playoffs. Like, these guys need to make the playoffs. The playoffs are fun. The playoffs are the payoff. And, that's a big deal. Just making it has, even if you just take away the 16 years, just making the playoffs for so many of these players will be huge for their careers. And there are some players who, have been there and they want to get back to there. And so, no, I never want Harrison Barnes traded from the Kings. I'm just realistic about the fact that, not only is he in a place in his career where, it being respectful for him, if you're not going to be good, then you need to help him find somewhere that he can go be successful again. But also, like, sometimes you just run out of time with a player. 3.5 years is a long time to be with a player. And especially when, you've won, a total of 92 games. That's really tough. It's tough to ask a player to keep putting their career on hold to do what you're doing, to have bad seasons and not the successes that you thought you might have.
It's not just realistically, I think, about where Harrison is in his career. It's also where Harrison is at in this particular contract. Like that's a factor in all of this too. He's at the end. Like this is it. Like this is traditional shopping of a player that if like you haven't signed to a contract extension, this is typically where you explore the options of moving him. That's not unique to Harrison Barnes at all.
Yeah, and if you look at Harrison Barnes, like if you guys watch the video and you see the look on his face, that's the same look he had on his face at the end of the season, and that's like when we're making honest assessments about who and what a player is and whether they're going to be around long term, whether they'll sign an extension, all that stuff. There is a lot that goes into that. We're not just like throwing stuff out there against the wall just to make. I'm not a hot take guy. That's not who I am as a reporter. Just being honest, like known Harrison for quite a few years now, done one-on-one sit-down interviews with him. He's been on my podcast multiple times. I've sat down and did an interview with his wife before. Like you get a feel for people when you do this job, and I hope that something changes and that there is a point where this team finds some sort of kismet and takes off and they find success and they're on the right path. And he wants to stay because I think he's a very good basketball player. He's an excellent human being. He's also like an incredible ambassador for a franchise, and it's something that like I've always pushed forward. That like there's for me, you don't trade Harrison Barnes. Trade Harrison Barnes. You trade him because you're going to lose him because of the asset management aspect of it. You trade him because a better deal comes along and you have a better player coming in that's younger and under contract for longer, where one team might be in a different place and they need to make a move and you need to make a move. You don't trade him to trade him because he's too much of an asset to a franchise for all that he does as a basketball player, but also off the court, in the locker room, everywhere else.
I agree with you, Ham. And I'm just sitting here thinking about, Harrison Barnes in his role on this year's team. And I really feel, I don't know, man, I really feel like, because we talked about this last week about, if he's this option, that option, or whatever the case may be. If he somehow became the fourth option on this team, part of me feels like that's such a better fit for him. It takes a lot of pressure off of him to we know he can score 16, 17 points in that. We know that. But I just believe at this point in his career, he'd much rather be at around 12, 13 and distributing the ball and focusing on defense and rebounding and things of that nature, and not necessarily have to say, hey, if you don't put up 18 to 20, we're going to lose tonight. Like, I don't think he is really looking for that. He'll try his best because, like we talked about, he's a professional, but I don't think that's his role in the league no more. So I think with this group, I think it could fit him perfectly if everything plays according to plan with how these other guys are going to step up a little bit.
Yeah, I look at him a different way. To be honest with you, he doesn't care. He doesn't care if he's the third option, the fourth option, the second option, the fifth option. He doesn't. All that matters to him is the W. I mean, and that's what, we saw from Monty McNair's comments earlier. What do you want to see from the offense getting better, the defense getting better? What is the one thing you want to see this year? He said, more wins. That's where they're at. You losing hurts. Like, if you go out, it doesn't matter what you do. Like, I hate to lose. It doesn't matter what I do. If I'm playing a board game, I'm not fun to play with. Like, I don't like to lose. And these players are that way, man. They don't like losing. And, we talk about the 31, 31, and 30 wins over the last 3 years. It's 92 wins. How many losses is that? It's a lot. We're talking about 41, 41, and 52. It's a lot more losses than it is wins, and that's difficult for any player. It's difficult for any franchise, and to get stuck in it perpetually is even more. It breaks a player. It does, and you don't want that. You don't want that at all.
James, are you good? By the way,
I got De'Aaron Fox walking up for an interview, but that's okay. I can get Fox this week. What's going on?
Are you being? I actually thought you were kidding. Do you want to get up and go talk to De'Aaron?
No, I'm okay. I'll get De'Aaron. I'll get De'Aaron this week. I'm okay. He looks great though. He does.
I just want to make sure. It'd be a shame if you just took the whole setup and walked over there and started interviewing De'Aaron. I don't know what the perfect scenario is. Like if but all things go well. let's say whether we're talking play-ins or whether we're talking playoff or whatever. Is there any scenario that you see realistically where Harrison is back here next year for the next 2 years, 3 years?
It's got to be a really small thing, like like percentage wise. Like I think if they were winning and they were clearly on a path, and they were showing that they're the next up and coming team, then maybe I could see it. But look,
Far-fetched.
no, I mean everything has to go right, and
Yeah.
that's the way this goes. Like you don't lose Harrison Barnes to lose Harrison Barnes. That's not why you do it. If you're doing it, it's because it's what's best for the franchise long term. And so, yeah, I mean, I hope he's around. He's been a spectacular ambassador, a spectacular person to talk to, not only on the record, but off the record. He's a good dude. And, like there's a lot of good players in here. There's a lot of good guys that are in here. At some point, it's got to be about winning, and it's not one player's fault that you're losing. But there hasn't been one player who's been able to put them over the top either.
So, James, I'm thinking about this in every aspect of the team and Harrison Barnes. Doesn't there have to be a conversation then?
There's been conversations.
Okay.
I guarantee, like this isn't a front office that doesn't have conversations beforehand. They know what's going on. If there was a deal to be made, or there's probably been deals that were close at some point during the summer that they've had conversations. That's just the nature of the business. So, like, it's not a done deal until the call is put into the NBA office, and we saw it with like the Buddy Hield deal. I mean, those guys were shopping for houses. I mean, that deal was all but done, and someone swooped in and stole the deal. But go ahead.
Well, no, and maybe you were answering this too. I meant the conversation between Harrison and the front office. Are those conversations going on about like, hey, where's your mind at right now? Like, what are you thinking? Like, are you just gone no matter what? Or what can change your mind? What's the percentages? Because if he's like if there is a conversation and he's telling him like, look, man, short of making the second round of the playoffs, like I'm out of here. I've kind of had enough. Like then they have to act accordingly, right? Like, is there conversations going on between those two camps at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's conversations all the time. Like, there's something called an exit interview at the end of the season where everyone's brutally honest with everybody. And then there's also conversations that happen throughout the camp, throughout the summer. And I'll say this, too. Like, this is the first year that Harrison hasn't been here, like, all the time. And part of that's because he's got, a 13-month-old little girl at home. And, you're just not – he's 30 years old. Life changes, and you're different, from when you're a 19-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid trying to make it. But at the same time, like, look, the lines of communication between all these guys are always open. They know. And I don't think that there's been a direct, like, hey, trade me now. But I certainly think that, there's been honest conversations all the way along the way. And that's why you hear his name mentioned. That's why you hear, in the past, Rashawn Holmes' names mentioned, or even last year, and why you heard Buddy Hield or Marvin Bagley. They have these conversations. It's just about finding a deal that makes sense for everybody and closing the deal.
Switching gears a little bit, Jay Crowder, we know he did not report to Media Day, mutually agreed with the Phoenix Suns. They're going to try to find a new home for him. Any scenario where that makes sense for Sacramento to get involved in those conversations?
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of scenarios that make sense for the Kings. Jay Crowder is a very, very good defensive player. Strong 3-and-D, can play the 3 and the 4. Veteran guy. He makes a lot of sense. He had a really bad shooting year last year. Well, he had a rough shooting year, not a horrible shooting year. But I think he can get back to being the player that he was 2 years ago. And so, yeah, I would listen. It's just, what is it going to cost you? And, because I'm not trading Harrison Barnes for Jay Crowder. That's not a square deal, and I'm not taking Dario Saric and Jay Crowder unless I get a future first-round pick. And even that, again, like, you got to weigh the loss this year versus, the long term. And at 31, Jay Crowder's under contract for just this year. It's not like you're finding the solution there. You're finding a short-term answer to do something different. And doing something different is not the reason why you should make a trade right now.
The Crowder does intrigue me as a player. I like what he brings to the table
Me too.
on the court, and it seems like, I'm not sure, but it seems like in the locker room, toughness and some leadership as well. That I think really could help out the Sacramento Kings. It just kind of feels like if he were to come to Sacramento in any kind of deal, it feels like it would involve Harrison Barnes. And you say that's a non-starter for you, huh, James?
Well, I mean, maybe that's a deal, but like the Kings have other players that you could fit into a deal to make a move for Jay Crowder. It's not like he makes a lot of money. It's different than like a Bojan Bogdanovic, where you're looking at an $18-19 million contract. There's like 12 million. You could put together a smaller package that would work. But it's whether it makes sense for the Kings and whether he's a piece that you think puts you over the top. He is a winner, and he is a very, very good defensive player. I mean, that's a guy that I actually think makes sense for the Kings. But whether or not you can work a deal, especially while there's other teams that have playoff or championship aspirations are also chasing this guy, it just kind of depends on what the deal is.
Monty mentioned earlier in your media scrum that he referenced the line of we're not done. We're always trying to get better. We're always trying to improve. With that, with that being restated today, again here on September 26th, does your gut tell you this is the roster that starts October 18th or opening night, whatever that is? Does your gut tell you this is the roster?
It probably is, but that doesn't mean it's a roster come December 16th. December 15th is a date that everyone needs to circle.
I ain't falling for that again. I ain't falling for that again.
Yeah.
I mean, this last year.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to wait and see. Like I would like to pontificate and throw something out here that makes a lot of sense that the Kings will make a trade. I'm not going to say it, that it's done, that there are no trades that will happen between now and opening night. I think it's very possible. But at the same time, if I were a betting man, I would say we're probably looking at this is a team until, January or February. And then that's when you see what you've got and you try to make one big swing if you can.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Go with that. I like where they're at. Like I mean, like I think I have realistic expectations for this group, but overall I like the roster.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, you just know that, like we've talked about this. Like I think there's a difference between knowing that you're a postseason team or having an idea that you're a postseason team and guaranteeing that you're a postseason team. And I don't think they've done that yet. I certainly think that they've guaranteed that they're better than they were last year. And but that's not good enough. You got to, if you want more, if you want to be a better team, you got to be more. You got to be aggressive and stay aggressive all the way up until the point that you get a roster of 10 guys that can get you to the 5th seed or the 6th seed and guarantee you a playoff spot. And they're just not there yet. Could they get there? Maybe. But we have to wait and see what this team looks like on the court.
So far today, who's the most interesting guy that you've talked to? I know you've probably talked to these guys before, you're familiar with them, but is there somebody that he opened up a little bit more today? Or, I kind of liked his energy here at Media Day.
Yeah, I thought Dellavedova was different than I expected. If he's healthy, he's a guy who's going to give you a shot, right? Now we got Malik Monk up at the mic.
It's my boy.
James, yeah. I'm going to let you go.
All right.
I feel like you're missing out, and it's bothering me. And you've got content for the Kings beat, and you're responsible for little Brendan Nunez. So I'm going to let you get over there and join the rest of the crew, and we can catch up on Wednesday.
It sounds good. We'll see you on Wednesday, guys.
Tell Malik Casey said, "What's up, baby? Welcome to Sac, man.
Right.
That's my guy."
James, we appreciate you.
I'll tell him you're having a T-shirt made of him. All right.